All right. Welcome everybody to this conversation session, which will be beautiful. We're very excited to be here and welcome all of you from all the different areas of the world. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Yes, and if you're just joining us, please do say hello in the chat and where you're joining us from. It's really wonderful to connect to our global community here in the space. And we're really looking forward to this conversation today with Nicolas Janni and Lorenz. And we are recording the session. We will share the recording afterwards. You will have an opportunity to be in a breakout and do an activity in a breakout later on in the session. And we invite you to have your cameras on for those parts and be fully present. I will be watching the chat if you have any questions coming up, but we'll also have time for questions at the end of the session. So I invite you to just hold on to those and hang on to those and ask them then. And just inviting you to be fully present with Nicolas and Lorenz and the group here and just sense into what's resonating for you out of the conversation that will occur today. So welcome everybody once again. And Lorenz, I'm just going to pass it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm very, very excited to be having a conversation with Nicolas today. And also just want to share that this is a bit of a prototype for us. We've experimented with having a podcast in the past, and then we just serendipitously ran a few live conversations and found that it was a really interesting format. And so now we're kind of stepping into a series of live conversations as a kind of what I'm calling a participatory podcast. I'm really curious to see how that works out, but this is really our first step into it, and I'm really happy to be doing that with Nicolas as well. And also just a quick story that I think is very relevant here. A couple of years ago, when we were just beginning to put together the first version of our transformational experience design program, I participated in a workshop that Nicolas offered in New York City, and had a huge influence on me, on how we were thinking about our program and how we work with presence today. So if you've ever participated in anything that we've offered, just to note that our particular way with presence was very much influenced by my experience with Nicolas. So with that, if you've been in any experiences with us, you know that we like to start with a moment of stillness. And I'm going to actually invite Nicolas to lead that today to get us started. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Nicolas.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Lawrence and Natasha, for inviting me. And a very warm welcome to all of you. It's great that it's such a global group. So, yeah, let's start in a very, very, very simple way. And I'll speak a lot more about this, but let's open the faculty we have, the function we have, which we call paying attention or noticing, which has nothing to do with thinking. Thinking is happening all the time, but we have another part of us that can pay attention. And we can do that very simply by paying attention to our breathing. And that just means that together, with eyes closed or eyes open, whatever feels good for you, but you just notice the sensations in your body. Each time there is in-breath and each time there is out-breath, and you're simply noticing with kind of curiosity, like discovering. Because even if you've done this 100 or 1,000 times before, each time it's new. Each breath is new, and the sensations arising are new. So just take a few moments to track, as it were, with your attention, all the sensations that arise. And there'll be obvious ones, there'll be movements, and then there may be more subtle sensations also that arise in other parts of your body, not just where your breathing is. So it's kind of like with your attention, you've got a sort of torchlight that's lighting up the inside of your body with your attention. And as you do that, more sensations arise. Then you can add one little intentional factor, which is I want to invite you to relax your out-breath. So each time you breathe out, see if you feel comfortable to do so, that there's a kind of melting. And as you do that, even a sense of dropping down more into your sitting, dropping down into your pelvis. And then noticing more your legs and your feet. And just noticing that there are all of these sensations constantly arising. And then there is you as noticing, you as awareness. And you as awareness. There's a lot of spaciousness. You as awareness is no thing. It is pure consciousness. And we can just settle into the feeling of this unique gathering now. Individuals from so many different cultures. And at the same time with some very universal human needs, characteristics that are part of each of us, which we'll also talk about. The human journey, the human structure. And then let's take a couple of deeper breaths and really settle into the feeling of our body. We're sitting. And whenever you're ready, let's open our eyes.
Thank you, Nicholas. Hmm. Give me 1 second here to adjust the. There we go. All right. Yeah. Thank you for that invitation, Nicholas.
You're welcome.
So the topic that you and I said we would explore today loosely is healing and awakening. And, as I mentioned to you, I've spent some time today reading your story on your website, and was just so fascinated by your journey. And I wonder if we can start with actually what on your website you call a moment of awakening when you were in a Tibetan monastery when you were 16. I'd love to open up this, maybe first just open up some definitions around these words, healing and awakening. But if we could start with your personal journey with that moment, and maybe what began to unfold or emerge through that experience. I'd love to start there.
Thank you. So yes, something happened that was not in any way looked for, which totally changed my life, and in fact, in a way, defined my life forever after. And I was a very normal school kid in London, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was a great time to be in London. And one school holiday, a friend of mine told me that his grandmother was a Tibetan English, but a Tibetan Buddhist nun living in what was then a very small Tibetan monastery in Scotland. I believe it's now the biggest in Europe, but then it was just small. It had been started by someone called Chogyan Trungpa, who became a well-known figure in the whole field of development. And he said, do you want to come? And, we went up because it was like something to do and something different, and sounded like, kind of it would be fun. So up we went, and I can still see, with all the Tibetan iconography and everything, and hours of meditating and chanting, and it was all a bit kind of, not really knowing what to make of it. And it's not easy to sit and meditate when you're 16. And anyway, basically someone gave me a very classical Buddhist text, and I don't remember what it was, to read. What I remember very vividly is that I was sitting in our room reading this text, and it was like a kind of thunderbolt. It was literally like a whole curtain opened. And I can remember just totally knowing what this text was all about. And basically what it was about, as content-wise, as best I can remember, was it was saying that we live in a very, very small version of reality, that we've been conditioned to believe is the whole of reality, and that reality is far, far bigger. And it changed my life, because from then on, that was always like, okay, I have to know more about this. I have to find out more about this. And so I began to look, and this we're talking about 1970. I may be older than you think. So I can, it was like, okay, where do we pursue this? Or I pursue this. And there were, again, depending on your age, you'll remember someone called Carlos Castaneda. Mm-hmm. His books had just started to come out, and they were like, oh, wow. And Alan Watts, The Way of Zen, these were big kind of beacons. And I had a friend who hadn't come to the monastery, but we somehow got very clued into this. We were real kind of devotees of experience. And I remember we were both like obsessed with Castaneda. So we used to do things like we'd go to the mountains in Wales and go up quite high and probably smoke some grass and then run down really steep to get into altered states. You know, I mean, we were like determined. We were the ultimate seekers of kind of peak experience. And I remember we did yoga together. We both studied classical piano, so we were into the whole flow of music. So that was like, I have to, this is all that really matters in the end. And then I went in, because I was brought up in a film family, and my father was quite a famous filmmaker. I was always going to go into the arts, but I couldn't really follow him, so I went into theatre. And just before beginning my studies of theatre at university, I came across all very kind of choreographed in a way, looking back, in a little bookshop in London, little alleyway. I found a book by a man I subsequently understood was a very famous Polish theatre director called Jerzy Grotowski. Anyone of you here who has any knowledge of theatre will immediately know his name. And this was like, oh, wow, so theatre can be a spiritual path. Mm. And so that, for the next 20 years, I was exploring all of this through theatre, and in particular through the very high states actors could go into, what would be kind of ultimate flow states. And I had my own company, and I taught at some big drama schools, and we were kind of, again, quite obsessively exploring how does this happen? Like, what are the gateways that would enable a group of actors to go into this kind of very high frequency? In sports, they call it the zone, very high frequency states. And we really learned a lot, and it could become quite consistent, actually, particularly in my own company. And the most unbelievable things would happen in the rehearsal room, because the actors became like channels. And the energy was unbelievable. You'd sometimes feel like the roof was going to lift off. So it's and I'll stop talking in a minute. But what's interesting for me now, and you've worked with me and trained with me a bit, so like one of the parts of my work now is training coaches. But it's very different what I do. It's not normal coaching, and I have a year-long training now. So one of the core parts of the training is not how to actually, but the fact that we can completely feel another person. If we are open enough, I can feel your interior. And then I remember that when I was teaching acting and working with my company, although it wasn't anywhere near as sophisticated as it is now, when I was watching actors work, I could see 100% clearly where their energy was blocked or not in their body, and when they were in flow and what they did to break the flow. So that somehow was always with me as well, that capacity. Maybe because at the beginning I trained for 3 years in this Grotowski approach, which was very extreme on the body. It's like we were really open the body more and more and more. And that's definitely a huge gateway. Well, there's a lot more to say about that. Okay,
I feel like there's
otherwise
so much,
I'll talk for an hour.
There's so much to unpack there, and it's interesting when you talk about theater as a spiritual practice.
Yeah,
I think a lot of what we're talking about here, also, I'm assuming, as in the spirit of healing, is about being and becoming yourself. And then there's, I guess, the top level dichotomy of theater is being somebody else in a way, acting, and I'm fascinated about this this intersection becoming yourself and becoming a channel for something higher to emerge through you, and what that intersection is of acting as a spiritual practice. Can you speak about that a little more? I also just want to touch what you said about seeing. You said you could see a person where he was blocked, and I want to also touch if that's seeing or if that was more of a felt capacity.
No, it's a felt.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, in the case of an actor, it would be very visual as well, like I could see in their body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't, you see, I don't think of it the way you do. I don't think of it as myself or not myself, because I mean, although I quit the theatre 25 years ago, really, I'm still, art is still a major part of my life, and performance, and how I think about life. And so even like you see on Saturday, I was running an amazing program in London, which I'd love to talk about, something very different to what else I do. And on the Saturday evening, we went to a classical concert in St. Martin in the Fields Church. It's one of the oldest churches in London, but in Trafalgar Square. And it was packed, and they're very, very good musicians. And they played Vivaldi 4 Seasons. First of all, the acoustics were some of the best I've ever heard. So you could hear every line of the music. And there were so many people, and it wasn't tiered, so I couldn't see the musicians that well. But whenever I looked, they were completely in the flow, meaning they were feeling it in their body. And I had one of the strongest experiences I've ever had in music as an audience member. I closed my eyes, and it was just like my whole chakra system just got more and more lit up. And the result, by the way, at the end was there was actually a collective ecstasy. People were standing up, cheering. That's the power of live performance. The fact of acting is irrelevant in a way. Yes, it looks like you become someone else, but it's like well, they didn't become Vivaldi. The music worked through them. And of course, it is a bit different with acting. Maybe I should take your question more literally as you say it, because it is true that some actors get a bit lost.
I don't quite mean
they do lose a bit. They do. No, but you're right. They can lose themselves, actually.
Or part of acting. I mean, I get a sense. I'm not in the theater world, but I get, when I watch a movie, part of what makes the experience incredible is when the actor himself, Brad Pitt or whoever,
of course,
isn't anymore Brad Pitt. He is this character that he stepped into. So that's the dichotomy I'm referencing.
And it does confuse what I would say one of the highest actors in terms of capacity and in what we're talking about is Joaquin Phoenix, like Joker. You saw Joker? I mean, so this is someone who goes as fully into a character as I think would be possible in terms of inhabiting the character. Now, he also, because I say I'm so interested in this, so anytime I would see an interview with him, I would read it because I want to hear his process. And what's interesting about him is exactly how clear he is in the sense of how fully he goes into inhabiting the character and how easily he leaves it. But that's unusual, because I think you're right in acting much more than in music. It can get a little confusing sometimes. I think what happens in music, and for a lot of artists, which is universally difficult, is that it can become very difficult to find because they experience such a high when they're performing. It's like 10,000 volts of energy coming through. And what can be definitely very difficult, and we see many casualties, is to go back to so-called normal life. And that transition for a lot of performing artists is not an easy one. They don't know, they don't comprehend it. It's like a crash in a way.
But
It's a very, I mean, we're going in a way off topic. It's just something I'm totally passionate about. So I think a lot about this.
I think what really stands out for me here that maybe is a little bit back on topic is the term you use, the flow state. And there is something about, I know in my own experience, so if you really knew me, one of my hobbies is freestyle spoken word. And of course, most of the time, I'm not that great at it, but every once in a while, under certain conditions, particularly say at Burning Man, I get into these flow states where it just pours through me, and it's the best feeling. It's, you know, it just feels, I don't even know where it's coming from. It's incredible. That's where I want to be all the time. But also when I've been in the presence of a performer who's in that state, that's the only place I want to be. You know, it's like, wow. And what is it about? I guess, you know, the obvious is like everyone talks about flow state as like where you want to be yourself. But then flow state as the impact it has on other people who are witness to that is also a really interesting dynamic. Like, what is it about that you said, you know, on the performance, the Vivaldi performance, you know, there was this incredible collective experience. What are some of your reflections on that aspect of flow and presence?
Well, first of all, I think, you see, it's the same in a way as those of you who are here who are therapists or coaches or workshop facilitators. There's a similar phenomenon occurs that, you know, like when you're working, you can become like you say, you know, like you become very wise, you become very, you know, you have this feeling that you're not how you are in so-called ordinary life. And I think we have to get very, very clear here, because it's very tempting to say, I would like to be like that all the time. That's, I think we have to be careful of that. We have to understand what's going on in those moments a bit more. And actually, it's taken me years to even be a little bit competent with this that we're talking about. Because actually, I think I'm understanding that after I've run a group, or even after I've done a very intense coaching session, where my whole system is in deep, deep flow state, I actually need to consciously close it. Not the flow state per se, but the degree of energy coming through, because it's not needed when I sit and have breakfast with my wife. It's not needed. That intensity of it. Presence is needed. Absolute presence is needed, but not that intensity of energy that arises in the function of performing, whether it's as a coach, a group leader, or an artist on stage. When one is stepping into a function in that, you're lending yourself in a way to having that huge flow of energy. We do not need that in everyday life, and it's not even healthy for our nervous system. And that's exactly why a lot of artists crash, because then they start using substance, they start using, you know, because they're always trying to get back into that state.
So this distinction, though, of presence and the energy that is flowing through you, maybe speak a little more about flow. And you said it's taken you years to have some competence around speaking to that. I'd love to invite you to speak a little more.
Also because, like you said, it feels so good. Deep flow state feels so good that obviously it's even addictive. You know, you want more of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but because even in that, this is a great conversation, because we have to understand more about the human structure, like I said at the beginning. Because when we're in deep flow state, the more wounded, the more fragmented parts of us pretty much go into the background or somehow get absorbed. So we don't feel our grief, we don't feel our fears, we don't feel our sorrows. They temporarily kind of fade, which is part of the reason why we want to feel like that all the time.
You hear this from, I know, I forget who, some big soccer player, maybe Maradona or somebody, who said, you know, I have all these problems in my life, but when I'm on the field, it disappears.
Yeah. And what a car crash of a life. Maradona led. I mean, it's truly tragedy, his life. That's exactly shows the difference between the mastery he had in the flow state and his car crash life. He was very, very badly manipulated by a lot of people, so I don't know if there was any way he could have survived. But presence is different. No, presence is the result. Our deeper and deeper presence is, for me, the result of two parallel streams of development. One is the meditative strand and the body work and everything we do to help ourselves expand. That's one path or one stream. The other path, which is much more difficult and much more ignored, is where I actually really work with all the contraction in me, which a lot of which is frozen emotion, and which includes personal emotion, transgenerational emotion, and collective trauma we can call it as well. And a lot of people believe that if I meditate enough, if I do enough of this, it will take care of this, my woundedness, all of that, my scars. But it doesn't. I also for years lived in that illusion, or rather that hope that, that this path would somehow dissolve the much more difficult part of living. It doesn't. So we have to do both of these. And even in all the coaches I train, there's actually very little knowledge of how to really work with this. And that's only in the last 7 or 8 years that I really studied. I trained with a great spiritual master called Thomas Hubel, and I learned a lot with him about how to do this work. And it's got to be a pillar, and it's what I do with senior leaders. And you won't find it almost anywhere in the corporate world, this work, where we really turn towards, where am I contracted? Where am I hurt? Where am I fearful? Where am I sad? And feel it. I mean, that's how healing happens. That's another part of our conversation, maybe. Because without that, first of all, whole parts of me are offline. Literally, whole parts of the energy structure of who I am as a human being are offline. It's like the electricity is off because it got frozen in my emotional body. So however high I get in this path, it doesn't integrate fully into my life. It becomes this thing I experience every so often, then want more of because it feels so good. And actually being myself feels like shit some of the time. So, and it's painful. It's painful because this work is difficult. It's uncomfortable. But when we know how to do it and start to do it, and when we support each other to do it, such deep development happens. That's every bit as important as this. So then the healing and the awakening start to become more and more one. And then my whole nervous system starts to settle and be more open, and I'm more present. And this is a lifelong, forever work. I'm more present, whoever I'm with. And then life itself becomes every bit as much of a peak experience as those incredible highs I get when I'm performing or running a workshop or whatever. Every moment becomes in the richness of presence. The richness of presence. Because presence to me means I'm here with all that means, and I'm available. So anyone I meet, I connect with them. It doesn't matter who it is. Shopkeeper, taxi driver, anyone. There's a human connection. The more we become present. And that's immensely satisfying. And then I don't crave those high moments anymore. I do my work because that's who I am, to serve in that way, but not because I crave that high. It's a long process of putting that in place, because I spent years, there's an American phrase, I don't know what it is, I've forgotten it, chasing the something or other.
Chasing the high?
Probably, yeah, but there's a particular phrase. Am I making sense?
Yeah, and you use a term that you reference something that I think about when you say when we become more present. And I think this is something that really became, I think, apparent to me in participating in your workshop. It really opened up this territory of presence as a spectrum rather than a point of existence. And like, speak about that a little bit. What's the spectrum of presence?
It's an interesting word you use. I mean, first of all, foundationally, it's that I'm more embodied, because we have to accept we live in a culture that is very, very disconnected from being embodied. You think about how we were as children. We felt life moment to moment in our bodies. You look at any young child, they're having 100% physical experience of life, moment to moment. And then we close that down. We have to, and so on and so forth. But by the time we arrive in, teenage and young adults, most people are walking around and their bodies are very frozen. Except maybe they go and do a yoga class, and that opens the body, and then they go out in the street, and then for a few minutes or more, maybe, wow, I feel more alive. I feel more alive because my body came online. So that's why I think it's beholden on anyone who really wants to develop. We have to do a constant body work, whatever that is, because the body is a foundational part of I'm here. And it's a feeling of I'm self-connection, like I feel more at home. I ask everyone, just to imagine the last time you felt deeply connected in your body and deeply settled and open in your body. Feels very good. It's like coming home. It's like coming home. And I often ask a group of corporate people to reference that, and then they can. And then I say, so how much of each day do you have that experience in your body? The average is 5% of the time.
That's pretty good.
Depends how you know, but to me, that just shows how deeply dysfunctional we are. Because it's not only the self-contact of coming home, I feel the world through my body. We got so locked in our thinking. In one way, all of my work is concerned with breaking the narrative we're in all the time, the conceptual bubble that we're in.
The story making.
All the time, thinking, that's out here. And here is me. Here is what's happening inside me, my body, my emotions. Even someone says, yeah, I know I do feel a bit anxious because, and then we hear the whole narrative, and there's no longer a connection to the feeling. And this is a huge work to correct that, because we're absolutely lost in narrative most of the time. And narrative is disconnected from life. We seem to have forgotten that my thinking is a function, but it doesn't feel anything. I can't experience anything with thinking. We really need to wake up to that. Thinking is a function that should serve me. That's why Einstein said, is your thinking your master or your servant? And for most people, it's the master. It's running everything. How are you feeling? You ask someone. You just get a lot of thinking. Even if they use the word I feel, no, you're not going to, it's just misuse of language, because all you're going to get is thinking. So healing and awakening go hand in hand. And of course, the narrative, with the fact that we're like that, is precisely a lot of the time because when we start to feel, we face more painful feelings often. And we face feelings that we needed to regulate, we needed to close down in our development. We needed to survive, because we weren't supported in the right way often. And narrative and thinking is one of the ways we protect ourselves from feeling. And it needs to be respected while gently corrected. So if you remember the workshop in New York, most probably you can remember that what happens over 2 days or however long it was, is that the group gets more and more embodied. And the group starts to feel more. So it's like life suddenly becomes technicolor instead of gray, because everyone is feeling more. Some of those feelings are painful feelings, but it's still a life happening, life happening.
That kind of lands me back where we just were talking about the impact of flow state on other people, because one of the things that I noticed in that workshop, and it really kind of landed a lot of my exploration into what we do now, but there was a certain convergence that occurred through that workshop, which was that I had this collective experience where we weren't doing plant medicine or any particularly exotic modality. We were just becoming present as a group, as a group. But and what you're touching there about, I think that really lands, like what was happening there. We were feeling ourselves more, but we were doing it together, side by side.
Exactly.
That then had this kind of synergistic impact, almost like you watching the orchestra, being in the collective space that's resonating off of that. And I think that's a really interesting, that's the power of working with presence in a group.
And in everyday life, Lawrence. Because I'm sure everyone knows, let's suppose you're having a really good day and you feel very open, you feel very grounded. Every interaction you have, often the other person is a bit lit up afterwards. And so are you, because there's been a connection. And that's very real. Because if you're more present, or I'm more present, whoever I meet is affected by that. Mostly in an extremely positive way.
I want to take a quick detour here, because now we've gone deeply into this territory of healing. And there was something you said right at the beginning of the call that's been tingling for me. We were talking about your moment of awakening, and you said a moment that I wasn't looking for. And I'm just curious, we're talking about this term awakening, and maybe, so what exactly does it mean? And is it something that you're not looking for? Is there a way that somebody can, I guess even the desire for awakening is already an awakening. So I wonder if there's a little more to unpack there in terms of the mechanics of such a process. And I'll just add just a little bit of my story here, that I had a distinct moment of awakening, a moment in my life after which everything was different. So this is something that happened to me in 2011, and I talk about it often, but it's hard to explain, but it was something happened through me. I had a visceral experience of peace on this planet as an energetic experience, and my sense of purpose in that. And there was my life before that moment, and there was my life after that moment. And so that, I would put that in the category of certainly not anything I was looking for, thinking about, or at all reaching for, but it happened. And then after that, there was a deep yearning to, unpack the spiritual life and the healing journey.
Well, lovely. I think this is a huge topic now that we open. I was thinking also for a moment about like the way Eckhart Tolle experienced his awakening on a park bench somewhere.
I think he said he was almost contemplating suicide or
something.
Yeah,
exactly. This is a wonderfully rich topic. Try to be simple about it. Because there are two things that are true, and they seem to be completely opposite, and yet they're both true and necessary. So one is what's called the path of we can call it the seeking, which I believe should take those two strands that I talked about before, where we're really trying to develop in every way we can, and hopefully in the full spectrum way I've invited is needed. That's very necessary. At the same time, the deeper levels of awakening happen seemingly of their own accord, like you experienced. And actually, I've also experienced recently a big shift inside that I wasn't looking for and even couldn't imagine. It wasn't even within my conceptual understanding till it happened. And I'm fascinated by that. How I am still trying to understand the full phenomenology of that, because both are true. One needs to be a seeker. But if you look at all the great realizers, whether it's Sri Aurobindo or Ramana Maharshi or Adida, they all speak about, in the higher levels of awakening, are an end to all seeking. And I read that I've read that for years, but I couldn't really get it. I could read it and obviously understand the words, but I was like, what do they mean? What are they talking about? Until I started to have an actual strong taste of that. And I thought, oh, now I understand what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't looking for that, because I didn't even know, even though I was reading that, I didn't think it was something you looked for. And anyway, you can't, because the part of you that is the looking is the part that is transcended. It's complex, and it's quite new for me. That said, I think the path of the development, the seeking, and the work on oneself is as important as ever, even if it in itself doesn't lead to the higher levels of awakening.
Somehow there's
a very tricky topic.
An availability there. Yeah, there's
maybe, and there may be other forces at play that are just we can't even understand.
So okay, and then let's land this back where we just were, which is, so you have a moment, of awakening or inspiration or a calling, and hey, you said this earlier as well today about the lifelong journey. So when we're talking about healing, how is your understanding of this word healing evolved over your own personal journey?
Well, it has evolved enormously, because I was always seeking, and I found a series of spiritual masters, each of which I studied with for maybe 2 years until I met Thomas Hübl. Because Thomas Hübl was the first person, the first real spiritual master I'd ever met, where it was very clear that he worked with the highest parts of us and the darkest parts. I never met anyone like that. And that's why I wanted to get so close to him as I did. So the healing part for me is very largely, and this is how I work with groups and individuals, it's where we make it possible for those more frozen parts of us to become available, like the griefs we carry, the anxieties we carry, the rage sometimes we carry, which are locked inside and which, as I said, have both a personal component, meaning some of them were formed in my childhood. They have as we now understand more and more, transgenerational component, meaning I inherit the emotions of my parents that couldn't be resolved. And by I'll say what I mean, and then collective as well. We inherit that. It comes into our body, DNA, actually, I think, or certainly our genetics. Now, that for me, the only way I know that that heals is that we make a safe enough space to feel. And this is the most difficult thing for people to understand because it's so radically simple. That
like I said,
needs,
just presence.
Yeah, exactly.
Just feeling.
And I see in the coaches I'm training, it's the most difficult thing of all, even though it's so radically simple. There is nothing that needs fixing. There's nothing that needs healing. There is nothing that needs transforming. What's needed is a space where I can feel unconditionally whatever is arising, unconditionally. For example, I did a work recently in one of my training groups recently with a woman who's in Turkey. She's not in the earthquake area, but there's just massive trauma. And she said, I want to work on this. So the work is that we slow down enough to feel what's happening in your system now. Nothing is better or worse. What is happening inside you? So after a reasonably short time, we got to the fact that she feels paralyzed by this. The trauma is so huge that she said, I feel paralyzed. Now, some, if not many coaches or therapists would say, oh, right, let's see if we can help that change, right? That's not good to be paralyzed. My approach is, and this I really learned from Thomas, is, oh, okay, let's just feel that together. Of course, you're paralyzed. Let's absolutely respect and honor that and share that together. I can feel that paralysis in you. No effort to change it. We stay with it. And I have no idea where it's going. And actually what gradually unfolded was really pretty remarkable, because within about 20 or 30 minutes of just following her process, she opened so much to the point where she could feel she could meet and hold the collective trauma that was going on in her nervous system. If I tried to change her paralysis, it would have been an abuse of life. I know that's strong language, but that's what so many coaches or therapists try to do. They try to change life happening. If we really respect the intelligence of life happening, life happens way more than we can think, oh, this should happen, or this should happen, or this should happen. And we're going into training of coaching now, but it's a big part of my work.
Yeah, I really
And we
appreciate
usually
the
want to change something because we're uneasy in ourselves.
Mm,
When someone says, I'm in deep despair, oh, how can I help you feel better? No, I don't want to help you feel better. I want to meet you in that, really meet you. So you feel I'm here with heart open. And finally, you can stop fighting that feeling and just allow it, just allow it. And even in the darkest emotions like despair, once you're allowed to feel it, life can move again.
mm,
You asked me
mm,
about healing. That's how I would
mhm,
speak about
mm,
healing. And it's ongoing.
mhm,
And then we also notice the transgenerational and the collective. I've had the great privilege of coaching for quite long periods of time 2 African-American chief executives, both of them big names in the corporate world. And through them, we learned together how the collective trauma of what their tribe had experienced sat inside them. Because something would happen that would really bother them. And of course, it was normal that they were bothered. Someone might attack them or something or whatever. But as we would make this space to feel more and more, it was kind of like an elevator. You go down and then you suddenly realize, oh, we're hitting a layer of emotion here. You can feel it's much more than your personal experience. We're hitting this collective trauma of slavery. And it's still in your body. And the only way is we feel it. We feel it. It's very precise and very beautiful work. We feel it. And you say, how does this feel? Some of the words that come out. Yeah, I get it. That's how this feels.
So I want to make sure we have enough time to go out into
Yeah.
out some
We've
questions,
had,
but I want to maybe just complete here with maybe a final inquiry or question about you said we feel and the role of the witness in that failed process, because there's your own individual capacity to go down into your system and feel, and then there's what happens when you're felt by somebody, especially someone who's skillful in that process, and how
Yes.
that moves that territory. I wonder if you can just speak a few words about that, and then we'll go into actually you will go into a triad process or a pair process.
No, I think we should just open Q&A. I think.
Okay.
I don't know what we was doing. Let's talk about that.
Okay, sounds
well,
good.
but like you experienced in the workshop, Lawrence, you said it. As the group opens, you feel people more. Right? You remember?
Mm-hmm.
You don't just feel yourself more, you feel other people more. But I think that's how we're supposed to be. I think the way we live is not only a disaster, but it's tragic. Because we live, to go back to my 16-year-old experience, we live in such a small version of reality where we don't feel people. Most people are having conversations and they're not feeling each other because everything is closed down. So it's natural as we open that we feel more.
And at least for me, this is the basis of transforming humanity. You know, that I mean, we're talking about it right now in the context of a a coach and somebody who's receiving their coaching, but I think this is something that everybody can and ultimately needs to offer to each other. You know, that, like you said, like you've got grief, and to meet you with your grief rather than try to change you or console you or tell you that, don't worry about it, it'll get better. That capacity to be with another person is also something that each of us can practice. At least for me, that has transformed my understanding of humanity. It's to really, I think the single biggest, most valuable thing I offer people with my presence is to the best that I can to just hold space for whatever uncomfortable emotion they might be with. And I feel like this is at the heart of a collective healing process, that it's not just about what a coach or a therapist offers you. It's ultimately what we can offer each other in our day-to-day human experience.
That's beautiful. I couldn't agree more. Particularly when you said it's key to how humanity will go forward or not. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Beautiful. So, Natasha, what do you think? Do we want to do? I do like to do a quick breakout just to allow people to speak to each other for a few minutes.
Okay, let's do that. Sorry, I'm interrupting. I know.
No, go
but
for
let's
it.
do it like this. That do short breaks. And what I invite everyone to do, rather than, I mean, do what you want, but here's my invitation: not so much to talk about what I've said, but more to notice what's happening in you and to share that. That's with curiosity, like, how are you feeling now? What's happening inside you? And to hear and receive each other for a few minutes in that. Because when we come back, we can have more dialogue.
Beautiful.
Great. Let's do it like that.
Let's do that.
Yeah. So we'll just have, it will be short. So it will just be 4 minutes, I think, to share that. And let me just move a couple of people around. All right. So enjoy connecting with each other, and we'll see you back here in 4 minutes, 5 minutes for a question and answer. Let's see. Good.
And let's let's take a moment to I want to just invite everyone to shift into gallery view just for a moment, so we get.
I'd like to do that also.
Yeah, so I invite everyone here to just shift into the gallery view, just so we can reconnect with.
Oh, there we are. Yeah,
the collective space here.
That's nice.
Maybe we just take a moment to notice the others here. Maybe pick one person and just really notice them for a moment. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here, and we would love to open it up now to your reflections, whether you have a reflection from the pair share experience that you just had, or just a reflection or question about something that has been shared in the conversation here with Nicolas. If you'd like to speak, I invite you to click on the reactions button and raise your hand.
Yeah, if you click on reactions on the bottom of the Zoom screen, one of the options is the raise hand button. That way we can see who would like to share. Okay, so Gaia, please share with us. And I'm just gonna, Nicolas, would you like me to spotlight, or can you see?
Oh, it's okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Natasha. I can see. Okay,
We'll do it this way. Go ahead, Gaia. Welcome.
Just need to unmute. Great.
Just
oh
unmute.
my goodness. Okay. Okay, my first thought is, oh no, my heart's beating so fast right now.
So
my belly just feels like, oh, so I'm just like, I'm gonna stay with this just for a moment.
Great. No, please take your time. Take as much time as you need. Yeah. Right. Really, just take your time.
I'm just so happy that I got on here today. And I was telling my partner that I woke up at 11:15 because I couldn't sleep last night. And I was like, oh my God, this thing starts at 12 and I want to see Natasha and Lawrence and just be in. So It just feels so good. I feel so good that I jumped and made that effort, because this is wonderful. So I want to say that, you know, when you drink something or you eat something that feels really good, you can tell it's different from just your taste buds. You feel it in your body, like, oh my God, this is such a good soup. My whole body wants it. All of my being loves it. That's what I feel like in this conversation today. And the reason it's filling me so much is I truly believe I am living this life like that. And I do feel alone in it, but I also feel connected to so much in others and so many things. I'm connected, but I notice I step back from it a little bit so I can just fit in and be, you know, comfortable with others. And
Okay.
but and I like that too. I like that. I like to meet people where they are and just, but so like this conversation, and this is who I am. And I think I've had several of those moments in my life that I wasn't looking for, that happened, that you spoke of, you and Lawrence were talking of, that propelled me into that experience. So I would like to end the share by sharing one of them with you. As Lawrence and Natasha know, I had 2 years ago, I had an accident and I was not expecting it. I had just done their course and I was filled with just so much joy and potential. And I was walking home and I was hit by a car. I'll just leave it like that without going into details. And it really shifted something for me. And for months, I wasn't in the space of trying to figure it out. I was just feeling what's happening in my body and just what was going on. But every single person, almost every person, was telling me that this was for a reason, this is gonna happen. I mean, everybody had an opinion and I felt bad, like, why can't I feel something about this? But I just didn't. So I just said, okay, I'm just gonna be with it. And 3 months later, in my bathtub, I sat to take a bath and I've heard myself for the first time say, oh, I wonder what this is. And out of nowhere jumps in front of me in my psyche. I think I maybe shared this with Henry too. A poem from Hafiz, and I'm going to read it here. It's called Buttering the Sky by Hafiz. Slipping on my shoes, boiling water, toasting bread, buttering the sky. That should be enough contact with God in one day to make anyone crazy. And for the first time, I completely understood. And I slightly asked Hafiz for his permission to interject something into the poem. And so slipping on my shoes, boiling water, toasting bread, buttering the sky, getting hit by a car, that should be enough contact with God in one day to make anyone crazy. And that has still been my experience. And so I raise my hand, even though I'm nervous, because I feel I can share that here and that it will be accepted. I don't have to monitor my voice or anything. And so I want to thank you for this opportunity in this community, Lawrence and Natasha and Nicholas and all of you to be here to listen and to see each other. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaya. Thank you. Thank you for taking that risk to raise your hand. Beautiful.
Thank you, Gaia. And Gratan.
Wow. How to follow that. Not that I'm trying to follow it, but I think the teaching I got actually is from Gaia.
Mm.
And I really appreciate what you've just shared, because I can really feel that throughout my body. It's just tingling. And I really feel what you've shared. That's very powerful. And I was bringing a question of a curiosity around how do you, Nicolas, you mentioned about when you sense that collective trauma. It was so I was bringing a curiosity about when do you sense that, or how do you sense, and maybe that's a very mechanistic way of thinking about it or feeling it. How do you sense that collective trauma? And I think I've just had experience of that right now.
It's not, I can't really give us a kind of quite a mechanistic answer, although I understand your question. It's that you feel there is a much bigger energy field here, but I also done a lot of work with that part of me, because I come from a Jewish father Holocaust story. So I've done a lot of work with that layer in me. I also ran ongoing trauma groups for 2 or 3 years in UK, New York, Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon. So I learned a lot about the energies have a different feeling. Like someone could be sad just now because of, I watch the news and I just feel so sad. But then sometimes you also feel, oh no, this sadness has a very young part in you as well. And then sometimes you get a sense, oh, this sadness was in your mother and your grandmother. And sometimes you get a sense of, this is a sadness that's in whatever collective you come from. We just get more and more sensitized to the difference. That's all I can say, really. But they feel different. They do feel different.
Right, thank you. And just to say, I'm a huge fan of Thomas Hubel as well.
Yeah, I trained very, very closely with him for 5 years. Yeah, I mean, I was like as close as you could be.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Gautam. Sonia.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say it. I really appreciated what you said about healing and how it happens in relationship, but not by changing anything, just to be present with it. In traumatology, Dr. Stephen Porges talks a lot about, or he has one quote that he says, safety is the treatment. And you spoke to that as well.
Exactly.
That the safe environment, when the other nervous system can feel you, if we're just talking about nervous systems. So the one nervous system reads the other one. And if there's a really safety and presence, which is really just presence, true presence, then the other nervous system can, then I think the container is big enough to hold all of that and to be with it. And that's what allows it to heal. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, very much so.
Thank you, Sonia. Bobby's iPad.
Hi, Ben. Yes, sorry, Bobby's my family nickname. I need to change that. I'm Caroline to most people.
Hi, Caroline.
But I just wanted to say, because it was such a huge moment in my life when someone said to me, well, it was with a therapist, actually a lovely, beautiful therapist in Bath. And she said to me, perhaps this isn't yours. And I had an absolute moment in my whole being when I realized it was my mother's. And
Yes.
it's just a huge shift. And since then, you know, there are things that happen and I have feelings come up and I go, oh yeah, but this one isn't mine. It's allowed me to become more in the last couple of years than I've been in my whole adult life. It's huge.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
And
And then,
okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I also love the idea as well, the two streams about there's the work that you do, and people like us, aren't we? We're always seeking, and we are the seekers, and there's all that work that you do. But again, the other really healing piece for me is just allowing. And that, you know, it's taken me, gosh, I'm 53. It's taken me kind of 50 years to get here, but to just allowing is so huge.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know if you've had this experience also. It's lovely to listen to you. I do see that there are times when part of the ancestral healing takes place when we're, let's put it very simply, when we're willing to feel the tears of our ancestors. Really willing to feel that, because they couldn't.
Yes.
It was locked. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come down. What comes down is what was not allowed or couldn't
move.
And sometimes we need to feel their heartbreak or their terror or their rage or whatever. And that brings a lot of healing for us, but also in the whole systemic field.
Well, my feelings were, in a way, quite conflicted at the time, because there were also feelings of, well, that's not fair.
Yeah.
But you know, why have I had 50 years of having to deal with these awful locked up feelings? You know, and so there was part of me that did just want to let them go or give them back.
I understand.
Yeah, kind of. But actually, it's funny, that's following that has come with some really deep compassion for why my mum is the way that she is.
Right.
And a deep understanding and compassion for that. And that maybe, I can actually deal with those feelings more than she could. And that's why I'm.
Yeah, beautiful.
But it's not easy.
No, of course it's not. Of course it's not. It's like someone finally has to be the one who will feel. And it's definitely not easy, and that brings enormous healing. Thank you. Thank you, Bobby.
And thank you for today. It's been lovely. It's joined a few dots for me.
And Nicolas, maybe just a clarifying point here, because I'm just reviewing the chat here, and there was a commentary about splitting thinking from the rest of human experience, and I don't think that's quite how you meant it. So I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit about the kind of I know you mentioned the difference between thinking and attention, but also the place and the relationship to what the thinking process is in the experience of being and healing.
I think the whole problem is exactly that we split thinking from our experience. That's why I say, when you ask most people, how are you feeling? All you get is thinking. So the way I see it is we settle in a much ever deeper self, whatever you want to call it, but location in ourselves, within which we are embodied, within which our hearts are more open, and within which I have a very sophisticated thinking function, and they work as a coherent whole. That's why my book is called Leader as Healer, because the healing is this fragmentation of all the parts, and the thinking is much too dominant. Thinking needs to be this incredible function I have, but not the part that runs the show. My embodied experience my emotional heart, my intuition, and my thinking need to work in a coherent whole. Then I'm going to move through life and have a very different effect on life as well, and experience life in a much richer way. I repeat, our thinking does not experience anything. So if 95% of the time I'm primarily thinking, I'm missing a lot of experience.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you for our time together. And I really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we could have gone for many more hours and many more detours and nooks and crannies of this rich territory that I'm sure that everybody who is still with us here also feels a deep resonance. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will, of course, be sharing the recording. As I mentioned, this is an experiment for us, what we're calling a participatory podcast. And I welcome your thoughts and feelings. If you feel called to email me with, what worked well for you or what didn't, I welcome that. And Nicolas, would you like to share anything about any final words or also where people can find you?
Maybe just something Gaia referred to, and I think I'm sure many people know, is that we have to do this together. It's not a solo path, this. We have to have, whether it's small communities, larger communities. I could not survive without the, 6, 7, 8 very close friends and colleagues I have, where we're supporting each other all the time to do this work. And then the wider circles as well. Maybe you post with the recording my website, Lawrence.
Yeah,
actually the two websites. But thank you, and thank you very much to everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicolas. It's been such a great journey knowing you and discovering your work. As I mentioned, it's had such an influence on our work. So
thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. And Natasha, thank you for hosting. And maybe just a quick check-in on the chat before we leave.
People are asking, but I'm going to write the websites in the chat.
Yes. Write the websites in the chat. We will be sending out the recording, and maybe just before we sign off, share 1 or 2 words. What's present for you right now as we conclude our experience together? Just 1 or 2 words. How are you leaving the space today? And we have the 2 websites from Nicolas, nicolasjanni.com and matrixcoaching.net, which I will share in an email. And then we have the words being shared here. Natasha, maybe you can read some of them for us.
Deep gratitude and peace. My body feels more alive, connected, at peace, desire to be connected and continue experientially what has been discussed, noticing others, being and feeling, be listened, open-hearted, connected. People truly alive are just more beautiful. Present to my wholeness and yours. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Grateful and connected, inspired. So much possibility for healing, personal and collective. More accepting of suffering around me. Rich, inspiring, contentment, open and optimistic for humanity, warmth and gratitude. Yeah. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you.
And maybe just as you sign off, unmute and say goodbye in your language of choice.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
Turn me back.
Sayonara. Thank you.
Do swidania.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Have a beautiful day.